Okay, so let me just share my slides. So, sorry, this slide is showing the old code, CHM 506. It's ICH 512. Sorry. Um, I have a little, okay. It's a little mistake I made here. To correct this before. Are you still seeing my slides?
Yes, ma. Yes, ma.
Okay. But hold on, I have to make some corrections here. Sorry, I'll have to stop sharing the slides for now. And okay. So we're still talking of mechanical pulping. In this case, the bleaching overview. Sorry, this slide is still carrying the old code. CHM 506 is the ICH 512. So looking at the overview, mechanical pulp bleaching, and we have reductive bleaching, the chemistry and effect of variables. And then we also have oxidative bleaching, the chemistry and effect of variables. So that's what we're looking at today. So after the pulp refining, so the fibers actually are not that bright enough, so there's need for bleaching the pulp to have the desired brightness. So the bleaching therefore requires the following: goal of mechanical bleaching pulp to brighten the pulp with little yield loss. So that's a goal. Brighten the pulp with little yield loss. We have two approaches which I mentioned on the first slide. One is reducing the colored structures, and the other one is oxidizing the colored structures. Either of the two approaches will achieve brightness of pulp. I talked to you about chromophores before, which are the color carrying compounds in lignin. So these are some examples of chromophores here that I'm showing you. We have coniferaldehyde, we have paraquinones, orthoquinones, paraquinone methide, orthoquinone methide, stearin quinone, and chelated metals. These are some examples of chromophores. So let's look at the reducing bleaching chemistry. We said we do two approaches, reducing and oxidizing. Let's look at the reducing now. So reduction of chromophores to leucochromophores is what is carried out in this process. And what is used mostly is sodium dithionite. This is a commonly used chemical. And what this does is that it dissociates into reactive species, such as sulfur dioxide radical ion, sulfur dioxide, and sulfur dioxide dianion. So the dithionite is sold as a stabilized powder, or it can be produced on site from sodium borohydrate and sodium bisulfite. So this is what happens. The lignin reserving bleaching. So, which is the bleaching of mechanical pulp. We say lignin is still reserved. So the yield is not really much tampered with, but we have to work on the chromophores that are in the lignin to achieve the brightness. So the objective of this particular one is the reduction of chromophores. Example, the unsaturated structures like the quinone that I've shown you before. So let's look at how this happens here. So here, the quinone, which is the colored structure, the chromophore, is attacked by the sodium sulfite. Then it is changed. The quinone is now changed to hydroquinone, which is the one that is not colored. And so that is how you remove the colored material, converting the quinone to hydroquinone, converting the colored material to the non-colored material. But on exposure to light, then oxygen then came into play to react and then reverse it back to quinone that we started with. And so, which is now the colored material that is in that lignin. And this is why we have the photo yellowing. Photo yellowing as the coloring back of the pulp by exposure to light. Okay, so, and then in this case, using the hydrosulfite here in this reduction bleaching. So this is not as efficient as that of oxidative bleaching. The oxidative bleaching uses hydrogen peroxide as a bleaching agent. That one is more effective than this reducing agent, and we will see why it is so very soon. And these are the factors that affect and influence brightness. In this case, the amount of bleach added, temperature, time, pH, pulp consistency, and chelating agents. So in this case of reducing pulping, bleaching, as you have seen, color reversion is a big issue because it's what must happen. And so another thing is the species of wood that is used. It's also important. So you can see this chart here. We see plotting brightness against the amount of bleach used. Remember the brightness, we said it's measured in percentage magnesium oxide. So this is what happens. It keeps on, the brightness keeps on increasing with time and with the amount of the bleaching agent used, but it gets to a particular amount of the bleaching reagent that no matter how much you add, it will not bleach again. And so at that moment, if you continue adding bleaching agent, you're just wasting it. Of course, you know it attracts cost. So now this is where how far the bleaching can go with this amount, about 18 thereabouts pounds of bleach per ton of pulp. That is the best it can go. After that, it's just a waste of material. Okay. And then the effect of variables, the different factors, what happens. So one is the addition rate. You add 5 to 20 pounds per ton. Then optimum, well, it's not applicable. And then the result is that you have 7 to 10 brightness points at standard range. Remember what brightness is, measuring it with percentage magnesium oxide. So you have also temperature is another effect, another variable. Temperature above 30 degrees centigrade is what you use. The optimal temperature that this will perform best is 60 degrees centigrade. So at 30 degrees centigrade, there's no brightness obtained. But as you go on higher temperatures, then you achieve the brightness. So then retention time is another one. How much time do you keep the reagent and so on? So the retention time dependent upon other variables like temperature and the charge. Then pH also, consistency and chelating agents. Those are the factors and the ranges you can use and their optimal operation points and the results you have. So now let's look at oxidative bleaching chemistry. We just finished looking at the reductive one. The oxidative one, we use peroxide to oxidize the chromophores to uncolored species. And the reactive species there is hydroperoxy anion. Remember the reactive species in sodium dithionite that dissociated into 3 different species that are reactive. So in this case, it is hydroperoxy anion. So, and these reactions in this case are very pH dependent. At pH 10.5, only 10% of the hydrogen peroxide is the hydroperoxy anion. At higher pH, there's more of the anion, but also more decomposition of the peroxide to oxygen and water. Sodium hydroxide and sodium silicate are used to control the pH. So silicates are added to stabilize peroxide so that they don't decompose, and then the sodium hydroxide and then sodium silicate are used to control the pH. And then magnesium sulfate and chelating agents, they're added to slow the metal-induced decomposition of hydrogen peroxide, because metal in that pulp, the metal can induce decomposition of the hydrogen peroxide and then making it not to function as effectively as it should. So unlike the reductive bleaching, in this case of oxidative, the colored compounds are destroyed, so they cannot reform in this oxidative bleaching. So what happens is that the colored compound, the rings of the colored compound are clipped, broken. So it's cleavage reaction. So hydrogen mostly, or sodium peroxide, are used as hydrogen peroxide, sodium oxide, or are used. So the active species, like I mentioned before, is the hydroperoxy anion. So this reacts with the carbonyl structures. But it's important to stabilize metals to lower radical formation. So the magnesium silicates or chelating agents are used so that the metals will not affect the efficiency of the peroxide because of the composition that could occur. So you now have here, we're still using, so you see the chromophore there, and then the peroxy anion there, acting, that is the active agent, now acting on the bonds there and breaking it. So you can see the bond broken completely there and forming a new compound that cannot react back to form the chromophore. So it's this ring cleavage reaction that is employed here, this oxidative bleaching. So higher brightness is achieved in this case than that of hydrosulfide, that is the sodium dithionite. So in case of the hydrogen peroxide, higher brightness is achieved. And then the factors that influence this bleaching is amount of bleach, just like in the other case, temperature, time, pH, pulp consistency, silicates, gelatin agents. Color reversion in this case is not any problem because it's not reforming. Then the wood species is also important. In this case, you're looking at the brightness and the amount of peroxide added. So the factors, the variables, effects of the variables, you have the bleach charge, 1 to 2% on pulp. The amount charged effect amount, remember we said that the peroxy anion at initial pH of 10.5, you don't have much charged anion. So the amount of charge is also affecting the bleaching. At pH 9 to 12, too low pH is very, very slow bleaching. So high pH too high can lead to degradation of the peroxide. So you have to keep the pH within the optimal range. And then temperature, these are the ranges and the results that you get from these variables. So now let's look at the bleaching. So bleaching of wood pulp is the chemical processing carried out on various types of wood pulp to decrease the color of the pulp so that it becomes whiter. So the main use of wood pulp is for paper making, and so whiteness is important. So how do you measure? We've talked of how we measure brightness. So brightness, what is brightness? It's a measure of how much light is reflected by paper under specific conditions, and is usually reported as a percentage of how much light is reflected. So a higher number represents brighter or whiter paper, of course, in relation to magnesium oxide. So while the results are the same, the processes and fundamental chemistry involved in bleaching chemical pulps like kraft or sulfite, those are chemical pulps, are very different from those involved in bleaching mechanical pulp like groundstone and so on, TMP, CTMP, and so on. So even though the results that we're trying to achieve are the same, that is to achieve brightness, but the chemistry involved in the two different types of pulp bleaching, that is of chemical pulp and mechanical pulp, are different. So chemical pulp contain very little lignin. Of course, you know why, because of the amount of chemical that is used in the pulping process. So in that process, a lot of lignin is lost. And so that's why we have very little lignin in chemical pulps. While mechanical pulp contain most of the lignin which was present in the wood, because of course not much of it is lost while pulping. We don't use much chemical, just a little one to soak and then bring out and do the pulping. So lignin is the main source of color in pulp due to the presence of various chromophores naturally present in wood, as you can see. So the objective of bleaching mechanical pulp, which is referred to as brightening, is to remove only the chromophore, which is the color-causing groups. And so this is possible because the structures, as the chromophore structures, are susceptible to oxidation and reduction reactions. And then the chemicals that are used here, we look at the alkaline hydrogen peroxide. It's the most commonly used bleaching agent for mechanical pulp. The amount of base, such as sodium hydroxide, is less than that used in chemical pulps, and the temperature are lower in case of mechanical pulp bleaching. So, and these conditions allow alkaline peroxide to selectively oxidize non-aromatic conjugated groups and is responsible for absorbing visible light. So that the decomposition of hydrogen peroxide catalyzed by transition metals like iron, manganese, and copper are of great importance. And so it is therefore important to make sure the metals are removed. And then the use of chelating agents like EDTA is important. to remove some of these metal ions from the pulp before adding the peroxide. And so this will enhance the efficiency of the peroxide. Magnesium salt and sodium silicate are also added to improve bleaching with alkaline peroxide. Of course, you know, the one I'm talking of is the oxidative bleaching. That's the one we use hydrogen peroxide. But in case of the other one, I will use the dithionite, sodium dithionite. This one is the reducing bleaching. So sodium dithionite, also known as sodium hydrosulfite, is the other reagent that is used for brightening. We're talking of reductive brightening or bleaching. So in contrast to hydrogen peroxide, which oxidizes the chromophores, dithionite reduces these color-causing groups. Hydrogen peroxide oxidizes the chromophores, whereas dithionite reduces the chromophores. Dithionite reacts with oxygen. So the efficient use of dithionite requires that oxygen exposure is minimized. So dithionite reacts with oxygen. If you expose it to oxygen, the efficiency will be reduced. So you control the exposure. Brightness gains achieved in bleaching mechanical pulps are temporary, since almost all the lignin present in the wood is still present in the pulp. The exposure to air and light can produce new chromophores from the residing lignin. And that is why we have paper yellows, newspaper yellows as it ages, and other papers change colors with time. So let's look at paper making. How do we make paper from pulp? The paper that is made is from cellulose, trees being the main source of cellulose, and where we get our wood pulp from. So beside wood pulp, paper can be made from other materials. I think I mentioned it in our first lecture. Other materials like cotton, flax, asbestos, straw, hemp, manila, jute. So some of the pulp properties depend upon the process used to separate the fibers from the timber. The main processes are called mechanical and chemical, which you already know. So in this paper making, we're just trying to bring, everything together for you to know comprehensively from the beginning, from where you start to where you finish. We start with wood, and then the different methods, processes that are used to process wood to pulp, which are either chemical or mechanical. And then if the pulp mill is close to paper mill, whether you carry out mechanical pulping or you carry out chemical pulping, and the mill, whether the chemical pulping mill or the mechanical pulping mill, if it is close to where you have the paper mill, where you're producing the paper, then, or it is part of the integrated mill, where you have the section that is for the pulping, either mechanical or chemical, and another section of that mill is for paper making. That is possible. And another possibility is that you can have the pulping mill at one place, and there's no paper mill at that place. So you can now have to transport the pulp to where you have the paper mill. So now So if you have to transport the pulp to a different place where you have the paper mill, you have to strain the pulp, remove water from it, dry it, and pack it in bales. The trees used in paper making are mainly grown in Scandinavia, North America, and Canada. They are cone making, cone bearing, for example, the spruce, pine, fir, or softwood, and leaf-bearing trees such as birch, beech, and eucalyptus, which are hardwoods. So these are the type of woods that are used. So now, going back to the pulp, you have your pulp already about to be taken into the paper mill for paper production. So that pulp is made to travel, is wired, the wire, it is traveling through a particular wire at a speed of 2,000 meters per minute, very fast. So by the time that pulp reaches the end of the section, the fibers have become a sheet of paper, traveling at that speed. Though it will still be very moist, and then it will not have much strength, still be very weak, still moist. By the time it travels along that wire at the speed of 2,000 meters per minute to become paper, but still soft, moist, and with very little strength. Then it passes to the press section. It then passes to the press section. So this press section consists of a number of sets of heavy rollers through which the moist paper is conveyed on thick felts. Just continue there. So even at this stage, the paper web is still weak and moist. So it then passes to the dry end. The conveyor belt continues to move it to the dry end, which consists of a large number of steam heated drying cylinders. We have up to 100 or more of the drying cylinders on a large paper machine, on large paper machines. So part of the way down the bank of drying cylinders is the size press. You have the size press as you go down the drying cylinders. It is at this size press that a solution of water and starch can be added to the sheet in order to further improve the surface. So this is at the stage where solution of water and starch can be added to improve the surface property. So beyond the drying cylinders, after that comes what is called calender. Calender consists of a stack of polished iron rollers that is mounted one on top of the other. Calender consists of a stack of polished iron rollers that is mounted one on top of the other. What it does is that it functions to polish or glaze the surface of the paper as it passes between the rollers. So still traveling at up to 2,000 meters per minute, the paper now becomes off the machine. Paper now comes off the machine and it is ready for winding into large reels. I don't know, maybe you have seen the reels of paper. where they are sold. So it's now ready for winding into large reels, each of which may contain up to 20 tons of paper. Each reel of papers may contain up to 20 tons of paper. So these reels are later either cut into sheets or slit into smaller reels according to the type of paper and the customer's requirements. Then at this stage, there's a separate process that is called coating. Coating of the paper with China clay, then polishing it through the calender. And this makes, when it is coated with China clay, you can produce art paper or the glossy kind of paper that is used for pictures. That is how you produce it, by coating it with China clay and then polishing it through the calender. There are three main kinds of modern coating processes. One is blade coating, another one is air knife coating, and another one is roll coating. The blade coating, you do it off the paper machine. And the air knife coating, you do it off the paper machine. That's your finish producing, and then you remove it and go and do coating separately. But the roll coating is done on the paper machine. It's done on the paper machine, carry out the roll coating. And then you can either be a complete coating. The roll coating can either be the final, depending on the kind of paper you're bringing out, or a first coat followed by off-machine coating. As the roll coating on the machine, on the paper machine, it can either be the final coating that you do on the paper, depending on what you need the paper for, or it can just be the first coating, after which you now further take it off the paper machine and go and continue more coating, like blade or air knife coating process. That is the end of the lecture today, and this is the end of my own section of the lecture with you on mechanical pulp making. So we have come to the end of my own lecture, and I don't know if you have any questions. So we'll see. We still have some few minutes if you have any question. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Let me know if you have questions. Why do we have just 4 of you here? Where are the other people? Where is the class rep? Victor?
I'm here, ma'am.
So why are the other people not here? I'm expecting 7 people here.
Ma'am, maybe they want to enjoy the festive period, which they want to do is okay.
Want to enjoy the festive period, and why are you and I not enjoying it?
Maybe because we're doing the right thing, ma'am.
Okay, so it's not a good thing for them to stay away from the class, even though I'm still going to give you the YouTube link. That is not a reason to stay with class. Okay, so we brought this lecture to an end now, and I'm going to send the YouTube link to you and also the slides, and then we'll see how we arrange maybe tutorials or any other thing, and then tests and so on. So we brought today's lecture